Welcome, everyone, to School Transportation Nation Podcast, episode 101. Thanks for joining us. This is Ryan Gray, Editor-in-Chief of School Transportation News, and this episode, as is every one of our episodes, is brought to us by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing. And I'm happy to report that I'm joined today by our Associate Editor, Taylor Hannon. Taylor, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Great to be back. A little bit later, I'll be talking with Amy Tiedens. She's the transportation manager at Intermediate District 287 in Minnesota. So we're going to be talking about a lot of good things, the weather. Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's pretty cold out there, Taylor. I know that I think when we were recording the podcast, Amy said in the morning it was like negative 15 out. Wow. I mean, I was walking my dogs this morning a little bit before 6 a.m. here in Southern California, and it was about 39 degrees, and I thought I was going to freeze my patootie off. So I can't imagine, so much of the nation is under the grips of this, polar vortex or whatever this is. So we're pretty lucky out here in California, but everyone be safe out there because school buses are still driving, getting kids to and from school. I know a lot of you folks are used to it, but be safe out there. So a big week in news, Taylor. A couple of big business acquisition headlines that came across the wires. First of all, Cummins Inc. Buying Meritor, the drivetrain and electrification company. Of course, they're partnering with Thomas Built Buses on a next generation Jouley electric bus. Well, Cummins announced this week that they reached a definitive agreement with Meritor to buy them for a tune of $3.7 billion. That's with a B dollars. So that's really shaken up the total commercial vehicle industry. And Taylor, this came on the heels of some news back on Valentine's Day last month that Cummins announced that they're bringing to market fuel agnostic engine platforms, all designed to make it easier for different vehicle operators, including school bus, to adopt alternative fuels if they can't go electric. So, they're looking at basically above the head gasket, changing up some of the engineering in the engine to allow for propane, natural gas, hydrogen. Of course, Cummins has the electrification business already. So we're definitely getting more details on that, and we're going to be reporting more on that. So that's a big shakeup in the industry. And then First Student announced that they bought regional school bus contractor Apple Bus. Terms of that deal have not been disclosed yet, but First Student under that new ownership by EQT Infrastructure. That deal went down last summer. So EQT really big in on electric, and so First Student is in the midst of switching over its entire North American fleet of 40,000 some odd buses to electric. They're continuing to grow. So they bought up about 1,500 buses that Apple Bus is operating nationwide, about, again, 1,500 in 8 states. So that deal should be going through a little bit later this year as well. So, a lot going on out there, especially in terms of, the rest of our economy, Taylor's not doing so hot lately, at least the stock market, I should say. Not necessarily the economy. I think the economy is really, chugging along, and we're getting through some of these supply chain shortages, but we've got that skirmish, I'll call it, if not full on war over there in Russia and Ukraine. That's affecting gas prices. So fuel, as we're speaking of Cummins and their agnostic fuel platforms, I saw a headline today, Taylor, that at the pump prices in California, we're hitting $5 a gallon.
Cry.
That's absolutely crazy. So certainly, we want to hear from you all out there in school bus land. What is the impact on your fuel budgets? Some folks try to lock in, others don't. That market has been pretty volatile of late. So certainly, we saw a big spike last year And then it just, with the prices, just seem to be going up and up and up, and really not doing much to help the inflation. Consumer price index has been through the roof. I saw, of course, late last year, prices had risen 7.5%. It was like the largest leap since like the mid 80s. So, a lot of concern out there, along with, trying to get through the coronavirus pandemic and get to the endemic land. A lot of states, as we've been talking about, are relaxing their mask mandates. And here it is, March. That means a new edition of STN has dropped, Taylor. A couple of highlights to share with the readers.
It's a great issue this month, Ryan, and I don't think I'm biased at all, but we had some good articles talking about drivers' salaries, what is keeping drivers right now? Is it a positive workplace environment, or is it those benefit packages, right? Is it competitive wages? And so I wrote that article, very interesting, had a lot of good conversations with districts who were able to provide $1,000 bonus to their drivers. And that was huge, especially around Christmas time, right? I mean, I think we could all use an extra $1,000 around Christmas.
Absolutely.
So looking at that, we looked at student bullying. We looked at mitigating risk, which is what I talked to Amy about later, is how, using these alternative transportation vehicles to transport special ed students, how can you mitigate risk and how can you do it safely?
Yeah, because the yellow school buses is, we've talked about this a lot. It's, everybody says kind of the party line is, hey, all kids on all school buses all the time. That's not necessarily feasible anymore. And that's been kind of a trend over the last decade that we've really seen.
Mm-hmm. And she attributed it to the driver shortage too, right? Mm-hmm. Another conversation that we've been having probably for the past 2 years and how the pandemic has influenced that. So definitely some good conversations. If you guys haven't checked out March yet, I would suggest you go. It's online, so it's there. It's ready.
Yep. stnonline.com. Head over to our digital edition tab, and you can access that. And then again, with it being March, Taylor, it's Women's Month.
Woo! Round of applause.
Yeah. Let's give it up for the ladies. So
yes.
We're organizing some content, looking at some female leaders in the industry. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and I wrote a profile, I think it was 2 years ago. I wrote, I want to say it was like 12 articles on different female leaders within the industry. So definitely, if you guys haven't checked that out, or if you want to just do some light reading, stnonline.com/tag/women. And so there's a plethora of those there of just, great student transporters in the industry.
A lot going on out there. Taylor, thanks for that. And of course, when we're talking about school bus operations, we're talking routing, right? Routing software, parent apps now, driver apps. Well, guess what, folks? Our friends at TransFinder has them all. It's called the TransFinder Trifecta. That's Route Finder Plus, Stop Finder, and Wayfinder. 3 solutions that work seamlessly together. But wait, there's more. Inventory management solution, location intelligence, the most accurate maps on the planet. You guessed it, TransFinder's got them. TransFinder is the all-in-one solution provider for school transportation departments, period. They're the leader in everything to do with school transportation. With more than 3 decades of experience working with 3,000 school districts across North America, TransFinder has seen everything. They built their solutions around what their clients need and want, and sometimes never even knew they wanted. They get you, and they've got this. Email getplus@transfinder.com. That's getplus@transfinder.com, or call 800-373-3609 to learn more. Coming up next, Taylor's going to sit down with Amy Tiedens of Intermediate School District 287 in Plymouth, Minnesota.
All right. So I want to welcome to the podcast stage Amy Tiedens. She's the transportation manager for Intermediate District 287 in Minnesota. And it's a little chilly this morning, so it's the chilly podcast stage. How about that?
Yes, it is. But thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here and excited to talk to you today.
I'm looking forward to it. I know we have a good conversation planned. And I was talking to Amy earlier, and we were laughing because it's 30 degrees here in California in the morning when I woke up. And her high for later on this week is going to be 30 degrees, and she was looking forward to that. So it's funny how what's cold here isn't necessarily cold over there for you guys. But I hope it warms up for you guys. So, Amy, I know you've been a speaker at the Transporting Students for Disabilities conference in Texas, but, for our listeners out there, can you give them a little bit of flavor, a little bit of background into who you are?
Sure. So I started with Intermediate District 287, that's in Plymouth, Minnesota, and it's an intermediate district, and most of our students that we serve have special needs and are in special education. And we have, some kids that have disabilities, where they're in wheelchairs, but a big population of our students are on the autism spectrum. And also we have quite a few kids that have emotional behavior disorders, or EBD. So I've worked with that population for a long time. So I've been with 287 for 23 years. I was an educational assistant the first 11 years, and this is my 12th year working in transportation. And so it helps, to bring my experience from working with the students into the classroom to help, kind of be a liaison between our school staff and our bus drivers and paraprofessionals that are on the bus to help to make sure that they're meeting the needs of our students and everyone's happy and being transported safely.
And you also have a unique experience in which you were born into a family that you said was all special needs. So how has that experience kind of shaped your career?
Yes, my parents were pretty amazing. My dad was a double amputee, lost his arm and his leg in a train accident when he was 2 years old. Then my mother was born with brittle bones, bone condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, and my sister also had that. And so, my parents, they're very smart, hardworking people, and just kind of taught me that you need to work hard for everything you want to do in life. But, everybody has their limitations, but that shouldn't stop you, for doing things. If you have something that you maybe have to work on and you don't do as well, then you need to work harder. And that's how I got that work ethic from my parents. And I'm just so glad to be, working in transportation and making sure all the kids get where they need to go. And especially with kids in wheelchairs, I want to always make sure that they have transportation and have their needs met because, that's in the environment that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm. And I think you definitely come with a lot of that background and that empathy that maybe some people don't understand or just have to learn it, where I feel like you came into it with that empathy and understanding.
Yes.
So kind of jumping around, we're recording this in February, but it's going to be out in March. So we're kind of in that wiggle room where we can teeter back and forth between the 2 months. So let's talk about Love the Bus Month a little bit. Let's recap. Did you guys do anything at your district to celebrate school bus drivers?
Well, as you said, I'm part of the Minnesota Association for Pupil Transportation. And so we did all kind of work together and made sure that all of us in whatever district we worked in, we're doing something special for our bus drivers. At our district, we had students that wrote thank you notes to their drivers and just, tried to recognize them, that they appreciate them. In the Minneapolis area, we have, the 35W bridge, which is kind of the main artery through Minneapolis. And yesterday that lit up in yellow to honor the bus drivers. And then I have multiple contractors, and they made sure that they, had lunch for their drivers or had, a special breakfast set up when they came in. So everybody just tried to do their best to honor, the drivers.
And within Love the Bus Month, Minnesota also celebrates the School Bus Driver Appreciation Day, which is, you mentioned, February 23rd. And so they do that greater, lighting up the bridge in yellow. I've seen pictures of it. It's pretty awesome to see. But it's a great thing that the state also is taking that control and recognizing the school bus drivers.
Yes. And, and I also work on the issues committee that's transportation managers and directors throughout the state. And we meet monthly with different issues, and we're able to communicate with the Minnesota Department of Education and to kind of let them know, things that we need. And we have been working with them hard for them to realize that we need to make some changes to make sure that we have enough bus drivers to drive our routes and that they all feel, they're getting the hours they need and they feel recognized every day to have pride and to be able to, transport our students every day.
So now jumping to March, we're normally prepping, right, to go to Texas, getting our bags packed for the TSD conference. That was pushed back again. So that's going to be in November again this year. But I saw Amy there last November. She was a speaker. I think she did a couple sessions for us. But we kept the March magazine as relating to special needs and transporting students with special needs. And so I think with your perspective, I think this is a great conversation that we're about to have. But one of our topics in the March issue, one of the articles was talking about transporting students and the risk that's associated with that. So whether you're in a yellow school bus or you're in, an alternative vehicle, what is the acceptable risk and how do you minimize it? And I know you were talking to me a little bit via email earlier, and you kind of noted that Minnesota is using a lot of vans to transport students. So that definitely plays into that article and also, what your experience has been. So I guess, let's kind of unfold that a little bit. What's going on with the driver shortage and why are vans becoming more popular?
Well, in the state of Minnesota, our vans that transport students to and from school or during the midday, they are called Type 3 vehicles, and they're a Type 3 school bus, basically. So I've been training my drivers. I have, EAs, educational assistants that drive the vans at our school. And then we have bus drivers too that drive some of our vans and our shuttle drivers. And so I train them, and they do have a training, but it's like an 8-hour annual training every year. They need to take a test and go through training, have their license checked, everything like that. Not all states require that, but it's a lot easier to go through that training than to get your CDL as a licensed school bus driver. And so vans have gotten to be much more popular. There's people that, yes, I want to work, I want to drive students, but I don't want to learn how to drive a big school bus. So that's the advantage of the vans. The thing is, with our district, we have 11 member districts that are all in the western suburbs, and they're responsible for transporting the students to our 5 different sites to and from school. And they've just, this year especially, we have a huge severe driver shortage. And they have found that it's easier to get people that are willing to drive a van versus a school bus. So there's a couple of the districts that they're just way too short with their bus drivers. And so they're transporting most of our students in vans. And for some of our students, that's fine. But the challenge has been for like our lower cognitive students, especially the ones that have autism, our nonverbal kids. And some of them, grab like anything or anybody that's around them. And on a school bus, you're able to maybe space them in a seat and not have anyone sit around them. In a van, that's harder to separate students. So that's one of the challenges. Another thing is students that are in safety vests, to make sure that the contractor for the vans has the right equipment. So, most safety vests are made for straps for a school bus. So they have a strap that goes around the school bus seat, and then you secure the safety vest in it. There is a different strap that's made for van seats. So that's the one thing I've had to do is make sure I go out to our schools and make sure that these van contractors have the right equipment. We just last week, I had an IEP meeting that I was in, and we have a student that keeps unhooking his safety vest and getting out of it. And so the district ordered a Houdini vest. And so that has like a clasp on the zipper, so they can't open it. And then the straps cover up, where the clips come in. And so it's almost impossible for a student to get out of that vest. The thing is, it says right on there when you're ordering it that strap to secure the vest is made for a school bus. And this district didn't have a school bus for the child, to ride in. So challenges like that, we have to make sure that we're communicating with the van companies, the drivers, the aides, train them and make sure they have the right equipment. And then also make sure that they're, kind of assigned seats in different areas of the van to keep students separated so everybody is safe as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's, been a huge challenge because every child should be transported via a yellow school bus, for their proven safety record. But ultimately, it's just not feasible. And, whether it's the driver shortage or whether it's financially or some students live out of the area, so it's easier. Or, as we mentioned in the article, vans are easier to, whip around. So where a school bus might not be able to fit there, a van could. And some industry stats, and this is kind of what we talk about in the article too. So if you guys haven't read it, I definitely encourage you go check it out. But vans are the most frequently used alternative vehicle to transport special education students above minivans, app-based vehicles, taxis, and transit buses. But if a school district is looking to contract with a van provider, what are some questions that they need to be asking, or what should they be aware of? You mentioned equipment, student IEPs, but, how do they get there? What is that question or that conversation that needs to take place?
Well, I think, it helps to have like a transportation plan. The district will, route the student, but then to make sure that they have an area for special instructions. We have on our transportation forms that we send the districts, we make sure that we have a section that pulls from the student's IEP their transportation accommodations and that they have all of that. So sometimes there can be a disconnect where sometimes, either the van companies or maybe the drivers or the aides are not getting all of those accommodations. And if they have all of that ahead of time, that helps prepare them. And then also to train, especially the van assistant, that's helping the bus aide, making sure they train them for the student they're going to be working with. And we've had some times where the aide will be in the front seat of the van and the student that they're supposed to be working with, is it in the back seat or the middle? So again, training them that, hey, you're with the student to help them, to keep them occupied so they're safe when they're riding the van. So sitting next to them, having a conversation with them, will help. So again, communication and training, I think, really is the key. Mm-hmm. And one thing, I was kind of talking about some of the challenges on vans, but I do actually have a couple points to make that there's some positives, to vans. We have quite a few students in our district that are transition students, meaning they're age 18 to 21. And so they travel during the day in vans for our midday transportation that I coordinate. And so they're transported from the school to work sites and then, sometimes to our technical colleges. And we've gotten feedback from those students that they don't like to be on the school buses because, they feel they're college students, mm-hmm. Transition students. And so they like to be in the vans much better. And they just seem to take ownership and, feel more adult riding in a van versus a school bus. So that's a positive of it.
Yeah. No, I think that's super important, get the student perspectives and see what kind of works best for them. So I think that's great that you got that from those students and that you were able to accommodate them accordingly. And are you guys using any transportation network companies? Is that allowed in Minnesota?
Well, again, we're able to use companies that they're able to have contracts with school districts. So they have to be type 3 van, that they're licensed to be able to drive students to and from school. And so we work with them. But some of the other companies I know that you have in the article, I think it was Hop, Skip, Drive, Zoom, we're not using those, no.
Okay. So with the vans themselves, and obviously there's different requirements, and you kind of mentioned the different driver requirements, but are these governed by states, or is it up to each district to kind of decide on if we use a van driver, it's going to be like this, or if we use a van, it's going to do this?
It is required by the state. In 2008, they changed it, where it's considered a type 3 school van or school bus, really. And so they have the minimum training requirements.
Okay.
Then each company has to fulfill those minimum training requirements. And then if they decide to offer more training, that's up to them.
Mm-hmm. And then it's on the school districts to monitor the contractors and making sure they are upholding those training requirements then, right?
Correct. And then also the Minnesota State Patrol, like for our vans that we have, they're inspected yearly every May. And so, you have to make sure that they pass those yearly inspections.
Mm-hmm. So kind of breaking it down, how many vans are you guys using at your school district versus school buses?
We have so many, like I said, I guess I would have to.
Sorry, didn't prepare you for that question.
Yes, I mean, our district ourselves now, we only own 3 vans, and 2 of them we use for shuttle vans that bring kids back and forth from our school sites to work sites at our Hennepin Technical College. But again, those member districts, we have probably about 300 vehicles for all of our 11 member districts that transport students into our 5 locations. And I would say right now, probably half of them now are probably vans.
Okay. And that's just because of the driver shortage?
Correct. Yeah. We had kids, like I said, usually kids that were in safety vests were in buses, but a lot of them are in the vans now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. I mean, that's really good information, and it's good for school districts to be aware that there are certain standards and there are questions that they need to be asking when contracting with these other companies. So kind of switching gears, and before I let you go, you've done sessions on incorporating PBIS, so positive behavior intervention and support. Wow, that's a tongue twister. And you've done that at TSD. And I know we've kind of talked before on an article on that. So looking at it now post-pandemic, have you guys noticed increased behavior on your, vehicles, on your school buses, on your vans?
Well, when COVID, first came out almost 2 years ago now, we shut down completely, for quite a few months. When we first started having our kids come back, they were coming back about twice a week. And yes, at first it was a challenge because a lot of our kids have sensory issues and they don't like anything on their face. And so we had issues with quite a few of the kids saying they couldn't breathe properly, or they just didn't understand, very low cognitive, didn't like things on their faces, or saying they couldn't breathe. So that was a challenge for quite a bit. Now kids have kind of gotten used to it more, and the drivers have gotten used to it, I think, too. We did have a challenge that, the drivers were afraid, too. Nobody wanted to get COVID. And so the drivers were saying, well, I'm not going to transport this child if they're not wearing a mask. And the thing is, in the state of Minnesota, special ed students are exempt. I mean, we tried to get them all to wear them, but if they are having a hard time wearing them because they don't like something on their face, they are exempt. And so that took a while for the drivers to understand that and for them to realize too is that's where then we need to make sure we have enough space for everybody, either in a van or a bus, too, for some of the students that can't wear their masks.
Okay. And then, do you think that's maybe contributed to the driver shortage a little bit, or is that kind of subsided?
Yes, absolutely. We in Minnesota used to have a huge population of our bus drivers that, were retired and they liked just the part-time work. And I think, or they were part-time retired and they drove school bus. And I think a lot of them now are, just saying that they didn't want to take the risk anymore. And so, yes, I think that's a big contributor to the shortage.
Mm-hmm. So is there any advice or any sort of recommendations you would maybe give to some school districts that are experiencing this right now?
Sure. I mean, and the one thing too, I think what's contributed to some of our behaviors is like what I said before is, when I was talking to the districts, maybe before they would have 8 students on a bus that could, normally hold maybe 15 students. Well, then they would try to put, 5 students in a van that were right next to each other. Mm. And a lot of the special education students that we have that have autism and emotional behavior disorders, they need space and they can't be sitting right next to people. So that's where I worked hard with our districts to say, well, in some cases, we might only be able to have, 2 or 3 students in a van because of their behaviors. So I guess my advice would be just kind of making sure you're looking at the IEPs of the students and seeing maybe what students are able to ride next to each other. And if you have kids that need the space, that's where you might only be able to transport 2 students in a van. But I mean, again, communication, making sure you have a list of the students' needs and their transportation accommodations, and then training the staff. That's one thing that we did where this fall, I've been doing training for a few years with all of our member district drivers. And this year I did virtual training. And me and an assistant principal from one of our schools we did about 7 trainings in about a week to try to meet the needs of all of our drivers, because we had hundreds of drivers to train. And we did that, and they could be interactive and ask questions. And it was about an hour and a half training. And we did it just for them to kind of really get to know the population that they'll be transporting. And I do have to tell you that we worked really hard to get all that training done a couple weeks before school started. And I've really noticed the difference this school year. It seemed to be, smoother because we did really work with the drivers and try to train them the best we could so they would know what kind of students that they'd be transporting.
Mm-hmm. So almost behavior training, is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yes. So we, the PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, we talked about that and, how to reword things rather than saying, sit down and don't talk. Instead, we have the poster, that's posted in the front of the van or the bus, and it has all the expectations, and it says, board the bus, sit down, put your seatbelt on, keep your food in your backpack, talk in a quiet voice. And so teaching the drivers to teach the students the expectations and speaking in a positive way. You're being a role model. So you're staying positive. You're speaking in a calm voice. And then the students get used to that's the environment. And that just seems, it takes time. It's not easy, but it really seems to help.
Mm-hmm. And I think we all just need that calmness right now too, just coming out of everything and the pandemic. And so I think that's really important that you're having that conversation with your school bus drivers.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Amy, it has been such a great conversation, and you have really shared a lot of good points that I think a lot of people are either scribbling to write down or they're going to go back and re-listen, because truly a wealth of knowledge. And thank you so much for sharing with us.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you. And I guess just ending, I just want to make sure that every bus driver and bus aide understands that they're the first and the last teacher of the day for these students, and they're very important people.
Yes, they very much are. All right. Well, I'll let you get back to the Minnesota cold. Maybe you can go sledding or something.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks so much, Amy, and to my illustrious co-host, Taylor Hannon, for joining us today. And thanks, as always, to this episode's sponsor, TransFinder. Visit stnonline.com for coverage on all topics relevant to the school bus industry and learn about all our upcoming shows at stnexpo.com. Register for STN Expo Indy, which is June 3rd through 7th at stnexpo.com/east. As always, stream, follow, and tell your friends about this podcast. You can find it at stnpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Until next time, Nation, be safe out there.